Hello everyone, it's Charlton, and I want to just kind of go over a little bit more detail. The press conference today that announced murder charges against Cristhian Bahena Rivera, who's been charged with first-degree murder against, of Mollie Tibbetts, whose body was recovered this morning or early morning hours or overnight, and he led the police to the body. I think by now most people know what's going on, but I'll just review just a tiny bit. They caught up with him after he showed up on some surveillance footage that was handed over to police by one of the members of the community when they were out canvassing for Mollie about 1 to 2 weeks ago. A member of the community brought the surveillance footage to them. It showed Mollie jogging, across the screen, and this vehicle was seen following her, I think, on multiple occasions. Either on that night or on more than one. More than one night. I'm not absolutely sure. So once they spoke with him, which was just yesterday, I think it wasn't long before he was telling them what happened. And more or less confessing to what had happened, even though he claims to have, blacked out basically just as the incident got violent and up to the point where he is pulling into the place where he disposed of the body off of Highway 21 in a cornfield where he pulled into a driveway. I'm going to read through the affidavit, that basically describes what he described to police. It's right there. And there's definitely, it's extremely odd. There's tons of holes in it, beyond just the fact that, it just kind of, and I'm not being cynical. It's just being realistic, and beyond the fact that it's just extremely convenient to forget, once the incident became violent, but also start remembering right before you dispose of the body, and how the logic is definitely hard to basically make it work. But I'm going to read through it, and I'm not going to go through so much theories, even though there's already speculation, in my own mind of what's going on, and there's just many different layers to this, dimensions to this story. Part of it has to do with the immigration status of some of the person, and probably people that he, lived with and so forth. The farm that employed them, and the farmhouse where they lived on the farm where they were employed. So, I think we're going to learn a ton more about this, and it turns out, and I don't believe she's named in here anymore, and I'm not going to name her just now, but his girlfriend, who I think he lived with on the farmhouse, even though the farmer where he lived and worked, says he didn't live there, but he had stayed there before, but that's all he would say, and didn't want to provide a statement, and according to this report, was extremely upset as he was just, making just a few statements to the police or to whoever the reporter was. There's tons to this, man, tons. So, but he had a girlfriend that he has a young daughter with, and they lived in this farmhouse, I think, along with other migrant workers. And this girlfriend was friends with Mollie Tibbetts on Facebook, with 2 different Facebook accounts. I've seen it, and she's also friends with the 2 brothers, Jake and Scott. Okay, now I don't think this implicates her in any way whatsoever. That's not, and I think she's friends with many, many people. We were looking through a couple of her accounts. One of her accounts has like 1,000 different friends. So I think she might have went to high school with one of the Tibbetts or a couple of them, but I'm not real sure. So there was a loose connection there. He's not on Facebook friends with Mollie Tibbetts, but he is, according to this report, and I'll read through some of it. That he has a child with this girl that I just mentioned. So, all right, let me start with the affidavit. It definitely is extremely odd, and his story is almost like from a movie. It reminds me of that movie of the person who was schizophrenic or multiple personalities, and he claimed to lose time, when things got violent, and then some other personality took over. That's not what he's claiming, but that's what it actually resembled. I'm just going to read through it and try to do as best I can. Okay, so on 7/19, Mollie Tibbetts was reported missing to the Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office. Shortly after Mollie Tibbetts was reported missing, video footage was collected from an area on the east side of Brooklyn, Poweshiek County, Iowa. Okay, and there's a discrepancy there, because during the press conference, and this continues to describe the east side of Brooklyn, but in the press conference, Rick Ron, the special agent in charge of the DCI, the Division of Criminal Investigation in Iowa, spoke of 385th Street, which was the western portion of Brooklyn. It was that long street that's just west of Dalton Jack's house. But nevertheless, sometimes these affidavits, they're thrown together rather quickly, because they're closing in on somebody and they need to get approval from a judge and things like that. And so they do make mistakes in the and they're just trying to, before somebody can make their escape or whatever, they want to, they rush through these things many times. So let me continue. And shortly after Tibbetts was reported missing, video footage was collected from an area on the east side of Brooklyn, Poweshiek County. The video was from the evening of July 18, 2018. After a review of the video, it was determined that Mollie Tibbetts was running near the area of Boundary and Middle Streets when a dark-colored Chevy Malibu was in the same vicinity. The dark-colored Chevy Malibu could be seen numerous times driving back and forth in the area. It was determined through other investigation that the dark-colored Chevy Malibu was connected to Cristhian Rivera. It's Cristhian Rivera, actually. But Rivera was then questioned by law enforcement about the disappearance of Tibbetts on 8/20, which is just yesterday. Rivera admitted to making contact with a female running in Brooklyn and that he pursued her in his vehicle in the area of east of Brooklyn. Defendant Rivera stated he parked the vehicle, got out, and was running behind her and alongside her. Rivera stated she grabbed her phone and said, "I'm going to call the police." Rivera said he then panicked and got mad, and that he then blocked his memory, which is what he does when he gets very upset and doesn't remember anything after that until he came to at an intersection. So, and that intersection is the Highway 20 and 460th Street where the body was disposed of, which is near Guernsey. It's about 15 miles southeast of Brooklyn. So Rivera stated he then made a U-turn, right at that intersection that I'm just described, drove back to an entrance to a field, then drove into a driveway to a cornfield. He noticed there was an earpiece from headphones in his lap, and that is how he realized he put her in the trunk. When he went to get her out of the trunk, and he noticed blood on the side of her head. The defendant, Rivera, described the female's clothing that she was wearing, including an earphone or headphone set. The defendant further described during the interview that he dragged Tibbetts on foot from his vehicle to a secluded location in the cornfield. Rivera described he put her over his shoulder and took her about 20 meters into the cornfield, and he left her covered in some corn leaves, and that he left her there face up. The defendant was able to use his phone to determine the route he traveled from Brooklyn. Rivera then later guided law enforcement to her location from memory. Law enforcement located the remains of a deceased female in the area Rivera took them to. The physical surroundings of her location and other factors at the scene matched his earlier physical description of the area as that where he placed the body. Based on the interview with Rivera, the clothing found at the scene where the body was located, and tentative identification by the medical examiner based on information about certain articles of her clothing, the deceased female is Mollie Tibbetts. And they're just explaining that everything points to this is Mollie Tibbetts. But I will say there's tons of statements in here that you could just dissect. But the fact that the clothing found at the scene where the body was located, that sounds to me like the clothing was not on the person. And I don't know that for a fact, but that's the way it reads to me. And whether it was, how that came to be was that I don't even know if that is the case. So we'll just leave it at that, I guess. Okay, there's just so much to the fact, seeing an earpiece that obviously I guess was ripped off of her when things got violent before he began to black out, supposedly. That's sitting on his lap. That just that jogs his memory that she's in the trunk right at the time where he's near a place that he's going to dispose of her. These things, they just baffle the mind for sure. You could go on and on because there's this entire map. There's the map of finding Mollie in the shaded areas, and the Rick Ron did mention this shaded area, 385th Avenue as where the assault happened, not in East Brooklyn, but like I explained, these mistakes are made in these affidavits much of the time, sometimes, and and that the assault took place at 8:30. And there's these other pings. I don't know if what's going on with that, and I don't even know if they're pings. I'm just saying. And the person conveniently loses his memory from the time here where the assault took place to where he ended up here to disposing of the body, and anything that might have happened in between. Let me keep going. I mean, there's so much to try to present to you in a organized fashion that my mind just kind of it's hard to process it all. So, well, in terms of one of the questions to me was where did he live and stuff like that, and that's mentioned here a little bit, and I do think that when they were having these press conferences and at different times where they were saying to the public or to anybody who might know something, who might have seen something, somebody that washed a car, or somebody that had just recently changed their drinking, or was having anxiety, or someone that tried to sell their car, or whatever, just changes in behavior of somebody. They were asking the public if anything they saw, please bring it forward. And they created this website, Finding Mollie, actually giving them another outlet to do that, in addition to just calling the phone numbers provided by Crime Stoppers, kind of giving an extra layer of anonymity, in case you really wanted to make sure you could just kind of put some words in there and not be tracked or not be anonymous. I don't know, man. That to me sort of suggests that, there was a concern that who might know about this might be somebody where their immigration status might be in question. And they might fear being deported if they come forward with information. That has to be a consideration here. It just has to. I don't know. I follow politics. I remember Iowa, and immigration's a huge issue in Iowa because of the farm industry. And the farm industry depends on immigrant labor almost to like where it can't survive without it. You should hear farm owners who work hard. They're salt of the earth people, they're telling politicians that we can't survive without the immigrant labor. It's a strange thing because they're very much conservative in nature, philosophically, but that sometimes is at odds with conservatives on that issue. whichever. But I do think that was a factor here, and that's why some of these extra elements of ways to report, anything that somebody might know. That's why I think this website was developed, in my opinion. And it just that's just is what it is, So, I wonder. I mean, also, I will say, him following her in the car and then parking the car and getting out and then running after her. That seemed a little cumbersome to me too, and I guess that's possible. It's very doable, but just seemed weird, that he'd be following her in the car, and then she's jogging, so then to park and then get out of his car and run up and catch up with her would have been a little bit, I mean, it's very, very much possible, and it probably did happen that way, but it just seemed weird to me. I think, what, somebody was making a suggestion. I'm just rambling here, and I'm going to keep going, man, as long as I'm, staying fairly focused. Somebody was mentioning, and I wish I could remember you, but I can't, of, the concept of maybe somebody just hit her, at night, and they were drunk, and they panicked, and instead of, because they were drunk, and somebody else mentioned that too. I think a couple people have mentioned this. So, but instead of doing the right thing and calling the authorities, but knowing they were guilty because they had been drinking or whatever, they just panicked and hid the body, And then at that point, it's so hard to come forward once you've done something wrong like that, and then compounded the problem by hiding it. That maybe that was a possibility, and when somebody put that to me, I said, well, the body was disposed of so far from where she was jogging. But the person could have easily just, instead of, could have just panicked and put the body in the car to take it somewhere else, to dispose of it somewhere else, but initially just hit the body as an accident, and they were all just drinking. And maybe it was, a carload of people, not just one person. And the thought did cross my mind. It's just a possibility. I have no clue, and it's just speculation that maybe you had a carload of people, and that maybe, just maybe, one of them is taking the fall for all of them, because something like that. But I don't think so. I think it's probably this individual. I think there's probably some serious mental issues going on here, as well as other things. I don't know that I seriously doubt the some of the other stuff in terms of the memory loss, and I'd feel just silly believing that, and so I think that's fair for me to say that. But in any event, Trump actually was speaking in West Virginia tonight, and I knew he would bring this up, and it came up, and it's probably going to come up again. There are many different political, angles to this, without a doubt, and it just is. He's 24 years old, and it says, and it had a very wide range of and we'll probably get down to the details of this, but he supposedly was here from 4 to 7 years. It's a pretty broad range. It's a big gap, but if he was here for 7 years, that means he came here when he was 17, okay, and that would put him in, put him right in DACA, and so. Okay, so let me just kind of go through this as best I can. It's background on him, where he was working and living, and possible connection to Mollie. But even though there isn't one yet. So, but through his girlfriend, who he has a daughter with. But it says he was arrested on Friday, and that I'm not sure if, I'm pretty sure, I guess it's accurate, but I don't know. And then he was questioned yesterday, Monday, the 20th, and but he was arrested on Friday after police honed in on his vehicle by viewing surveillance footage obtained from a private resident's home surveillance cameras. He followed her and seemed to be drawn to her on that particular day. For whatever reason, he chose to abduct her, Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation Special Agent Rick Ron said on Tuesday afternoon. But it's unclear what the motive behind the killing was, Ron said. Rivera told police he had seen her in the area before. She is friends on Facebook with the mother of his daughter, but it is not clear if he and Mollie knew each other. DailyMail.com understands that Rivera was doing seasonal work for a local dairy farm in Brooklyn. He lived with a number of other migrant workers on a secluded farmhouse in Brooklyn owned by their employer. You heard about today, President Trump, mentioned this in his, he was at a rally in West Virginia and he brought it up and blamed immigration laws on, on her death and so forth. Okay, so let me continue. At 3 p.m. on Monday, law enforcement arrived at the farmhouse where Rivera worked, according to a neighbor. FBI agents were still searching the house and a number of nearby trailers on Tuesday afternoon. Neighbors said the building housed a revolving door of hired migrant workers, but that they had never caused any problems. Workers associated with the farm told DailyMail.com that they barely knew Rivera, but confirmed that he lived there with a girlfriend named so-and-so and their baby. They said had gone to stay with her mother after Rivera was arrested. The girlfriend had gone to stay with her mother after Rivera was arrested in Mollie's murder. FBI agents attended another nearby property belonging to the farm overnight Monday to quiz Rivera's co-workers, most of whom claim only to understand Spanish. There was a panic when they arrived because they thought at first it was ICE launching a raid. A lot of these people arrived with forged documents, but it turned out it was the FBI and it was about Mollie. According to public records, the property being searched is owned by Mary and Craig Lang, whose family owned the nearby Yarrabee farms. A family member who came to the door said he knew Mollie and her brothers personally and was devastated by today's news. I believe him. He said Rivera was not living at the farmhouse, but declined to say whether he had ever stayed there. I will be releasing a statement. I don't want to say any more right now, he said, fighting back tears. Mollie was staying alone overnight in her boyfriend's home the night she went missing and was last seen going for a jog in the neighborhood around 8 p.m. And, there's just definitely, there's a lot going on here. And, it's too much to take all in this one video, so I'm just trying to cruise through it. And I think I have for now. We're going to learn more, and I don't know how deep where this is going to go. And, there's certain things that we just don't want to, because of immigrant labor and people not reporting things and stuff like that. And, is there anybody else involved? Was it just this one dude, even though the story's so strange? I definitely, obviously the thing about forgetting everything in between the assault happening and the time you dispose of the bodies, bizarre to say the least. But even beyond that, could it have been just more than one person in the car? And I'm just saying what I'm just trying to learn what happened here. I'm not trying to falsely blame anybody, really. Maybe it was just him, and he's just I don't know though. We're gonna learn more though, and it's just the beginning. Just the beginning. And that's the story now for there. That's the story for this video. Thanks for watching my videos. Please subscribe to my channel. Give me a like down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Later, man.